Oh, you should have died earlier, then at least I wouldn't have had to pretend. That was the last thing I heard before my heart monitor went flat. I was lying there, in that cold hospital bed, bruised and broken after the accident, and my husband, my own husband, Daniel, stood at my bedside, clutching my cousin Sienna's hand. They thought I couldn't hear them. They thought I was already gone. But I was awake, trapped in my failing body, fully conscious when Daniel whispered to Sienna, she was always in the way. I only married her because I owed her father. That was my goodbye. That was the truth I was never meant to know. Then everything went black. I woke up screaming, gasping, clutching my chest, only to realize I wasn't in a hospital bed. I was in my childhood bedroom. The walls still had that stupid pink floral wallpaper I hated. My mirror had the same crack in the corner from when I threw my hairbrush during a teenage meltdown. And the calendar? The date was 2 years ago. The exact morning of my wedding. It didn't take me long to understand what had happened. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't a coma fantasy. I had been reborn. Given a second chance. And the terrifying part? I didn't want to use this second chance to fight for Daniel. No. I wanted to set him free. To help him be with the woman he truly loved, Sienna. My own cousin. The woman who clung to him like ivy and smiled sweetly while stabbing me in the back. Why? I didn't know. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I wanted to believe I could finally do something selfless without being stepped on. Maybe I was just done. That morning, I walked down the grand staircase of my father's house with the kind of clarity most brides never had. I wasn't nervous about the wedding. I wasn't worried about cold feet. I was calculating. Observing. Smiling like a woman who had secrets and a plan. And oh, did I have a plan? Everyone assumed I was still the same wide-eyed, obedient girl ready to be the perfect wife. But inside, I was plotting. Plotting how to get Daniel and Sienna together. To remove myself from the equation entirely. I imagined it would be easy. 2 people in love, 1 sacrificial bride doing the noble thing. It should have been simple. But nothing is simple when pride, secrets, and unspoken desires twist their way into the story. At the wedding, I noticed it. The way Daniel avoided eye contact when we said our vows. The way Sienna dabbed fake tears with the same hand that wore the sapphire ring she swore she bought for herself. It was all there, the cracks, the lies, the love triangle dressed up as a celebration. But I played my part like a star actress. Smile here, gentle laugh there, cling to Daniel's arm like I believed this was forever. The honeymoon was a formality. We didn't even kiss on the plane. I told Daniel I felt ill. He shrugged and said, "Do what you want." I could see he wasn't heartless, just attached. Like he'd already disconnected from me emotionally before the ceremony even began. When we returned, I wasted no time. I began staging moments between Daniel and Sienna. Inviting her over for dinner under the excuse of family bonding. Dropping jokes like, "You two would make such a gorgeous couple if I weren't in the picture." I even faked being busy or leaving early so they could spend time alone. Daniel, oddly, seemed more annoyed than interested. And Sienna? She played the innocent cousin role too well. Her sweet giggles, the light brushes of Daniel's sleeve, the way she accidentally called him handsome. It was revolting, yet strangely satisfying. I was watching a performance, and I was the director. But then something odd happened. Daniel started noticing me. Not lovingly, no. More like suspicion. His glances lingered a bit longer. His tone, once dismissive, became sharp. One night, as I left the house wearing a red dress for a fake girls' night, he said, "Do you always have to look like you're going to seduce the entire city?" I smirked, replying, "Only when I feel like it." "You wouldn't know, you've never looked." I left before he could respond, but in the mirror, I saw his jaw clench. Strange. That was the first time in either life Daniel showed even a flicker of emotion toward me. To sell the illusion of moving on, I created a dating profile. Purely symbolic. But fate, or mischief, matched me with Dr. Noah Bennett. He was the charming cardiologist who once almost became more than a study partner in med school. In my previous life, I'd avoided him after marriage. In this one, I decided to meet him for coffee. Daniel's reaction? I never expected it. He showed up at the cafe coincidentally, then followed me home. Not to accuse. No. To water my plants. My dead plants. At 9 p.m. In silence. I stood there, watching a man who never remembered my birthday now carefully trimming my dying lavender. I thought they might still survive, he said quietly. I wasn't sure if he meant the plants, or us. The most unexpected turn came 2 days later. I found Sienna in my kitchen, making pancakes. Not just for herself. For Daniel. In my apron. Acting like she owned the place. When I walked in, she said, "Oh, hope you don't mind. Daniel loves banana pancakes." He told me himself. She was lying. Daniel hated bananas. He had a mild allergy. The moment she served him, I saw his face twitch. He forced a bite, and then calmly set the plate aside. "I'm not hungry," he said, walking out. Sienna turned to me, lips tight. "You'll regret pushing him toward me, Layla. He doesn't love you, but at least you had his name." And just like that, I realized something was off. This wasn't just a love story gone wrong. This was a game of power. And I wasn't just a bystander. I had been reborn to fix the past. But now I wondered, was the past the real problem? Or had I been blind to something even worse? This wasn't about love anymore. This was war. And I had just begun to play. The morning after the pancake incident, I found Daniel sitting on the patio, sipping his coffee in silence. For a moment, he looked like a man lost in his own home. There was no morning greeting, no curious question about why I had slept in the guest room again. Just that unreadable expression he wore like armor. I sat across from him and reached for the sugar jar, only to find it empty. Of course. Sienna had developed a strange habit of replacing household items, first the curtains, then the spices, now the sugar. She was inserting herself into my life so casually it felt like I was being erased one drawer at a time. And Daniel? He noticed. I saw his eyes flick toward the jar and then to me, as if trying to read whether I'd explode or continue pretending this bizarre domestic circus was normal. I smiled. "Did Sienna make your coffee this morning too?" He stared into the mug. "She poured it." "You let her?" I leaned back, watching his jaw tighten. "I thought you didn't like your coffee sweet." "I don't," he muttered. "Then why drink it?" I tilted my head. His gaze snapped to mine. "Because I was curious what you'd say." It was a strange admission. There was no warmth in it, but there was something else, like he was testing me. I realized then that I was no longer the only one observing. My next move was a calculated risk. I called Noah and invited him to dinner. Nothing romantic. Just a casual meal at a rooftop restaurant where the lighting was perfect and the tables were close enough to stir envy. He agreed, still charming as ever, and just as I remembered, kind, quick-witted, and observant. I wore a black dress, simple but striking, and let my laughter ring a little too loud during dinner. Daniel was nowhere nearby, yet I felt watched. As if the wind itself carried gossip back to him. And it did. Because that night, I returned home to find Daniel waiting in the living room. Not angry. Not jealous. just there, like a shadow that refused to disappear. He looked at me for a long time before saying, "I didn't know you still talked to Noah." "I didn't. Until recently. He seems different." "So do I," I replied. He nodded slowly, then added, "You looked happy." I crossed my arms. "Was that hard to watch?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "What are you doing, Layla?" I raised an eyebrow. "Living." "What about you?" He scoffed and stood. "This isn't living. This is performing." And there it was. He saw through me. Maybe he always had. But I had my own eyes open now too. I had found the diary. It was buried beneath old tax files in his office, one of the few places Sienna hadn't dared to redecorate yet. I wasn't snooping. Not intentionally. I was trying to retrieve a copy of the deed for the house my father had left us. But curiosity is a powerful drug. One glance inside the leather-bound pages, and I was hooked. Daniel's diary wasn't romantic. It was raw, defensive, and dripping with paranoia. He wrote about me like I was a riddle. He questioned my kindness, my patience, my silence. He thought I pitied him. That every dinner I cooked, every soft touch I gave, was an act of obligation, never love. He believed Sienna when she told him I had planned to leave him after a year. That I only married him because my father wanted it. In one entry, he wrote, "She smiles like she's hiding knives." That line hit me like a punch. All this time, I thought he hated me because he loved Sienna. But he hated me because he thought I never loved him. That every sacrifice I made was part of some elaborate performance to honor my father's dying wish. He saw me as a fraud. No wonder he built a wall so high between us. I shut the diary and sat on the floor, the weight of those pages pressing on my chest like bricks. For a moment, I wanted to run to him, throw the diary at his feet, and scream, "I loved you, you fool." But I didn't. Because that would be too easy. And because love, once questioned so deeply, doesn't heal with just a confession. Instead, I changed tactics. The next morning, I asked Sienna to lunch. She agreed too quickly, clearly amused by my sudden friendliness. We met at her favorite spot, the kind of place that served overpriced salads and called toast an entree. She arrived wearing one of my dresses, something she had borrowed and never returned. I complimented it, smiled sweetly, and ordered the same thing she did. Mimicry was a language she understood well. Over the course of our meal, I gently steered the conversation toward Daniel. She spoke of him like a project. "He's emotionally constipated," she said with a giggle. "But he's useful. Stable. And honestly, better looking now that he's miserable." I let her talk, sipping my drink, nodding like a confidant. Then I dropped the bait. "You know, I found a letter from my father. He said Daniel was never supposed to marry me." Her eyes froze. It was half a second, barely noticeable, but it was enough. I leaned in. "Makes you wonder why he did, doesn't it? Especially if he didn't love me." Sienna laughed too loudly. "Please. Your father wanted security for you. Daniel provided that. Simple as that." I tilted my head. "Then why the secrecy? Why did Dad hide the original will?" Now she faltered. "What will?" "The one I hadn't mentioned." "Not yet." But she'd just confirmed it existed. And if I had any doubt about her motives before, they vanished in that instant. I stood and smiled. "Thanks for the salad, Sienna. I'd say we should do this again, but I think we're past pretending." I walked out, my heart thundering, not with fear, but with the thrill of power. I wasn't the victim in this story anymore. I was the storm. When I returned home that night, Daniel was in his office. I stood in the doorway and tossed the diary onto his desk. He looked up, confused. "You should read your own thoughts," I said. "You might find the truth you've been running from." He didn't say a word. Just stared as I turned and walked away. Sienna thought she could manipulate us both. Daniel thought I was the problem. But neither of them knew who I had become. This wasn't a love story anymore. It was a reckoning. The silence in our house had changed. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt like distance anymore. It was thick, electric, like something was about to break. Daniel didn't ask me about the diary. He didn't need to. He read it, I knew he had. From the way he avoided looking at me for days afterward to how he stopped Sienna from entering his office the next morning with a firm, cold, "Don't touch anything in here," it was obvious something in him had shifted. But pride is a strange thing. Even when a heart starts to understand, it clings to the pain it's known for so long, as if letting go would be admitting weakness. So instead of a conversation, we danced around the truth like it was a loaded gun between us. Sienna, on the other hand, grew bolder. She began throwing little parties at our house without asking, acting like she was the hostess. She invited Daniel's colleagues, played the piano in the living room, badly, and introduced herself to guests as almost family. One night, she brought a designer over and declared she was redoing the living space. When I pointed out that it was still my house, she laughed and said, "Oh Layla, you're so old-fashioned." I could have snapped. Could have screamed, thrown things, shoved her out. But I didn't. I smiled and said, "You're right, Sienna. Maybe I am. But old-fashioned people tend to respect boundaries." That same night, I received a call from my father's lawyer. He sounded breathless, like he had uncovered a treasure. "Layla, I found something. There was a second will. Hidden in a safety deposit box. One only your father and I knew about. I think it's time you came in." I met him the next morning. The will was handwritten, sealed with my father's ring. In it, he clearly stated that I was to inherit the entire estate, including the business shares that Daniel had been managing in my name. He had specifically mentioned that Daniel was not to access the funds unless we remained married for 5 years. My heart twisted when I read that line. My father had never trusted Daniel. He had been trying to protect me, and I hadn't even realized it. There was more. Notes from meetings, account transfers that had been blocked mysteriously, and a statement that Sienna had tried to contest the original inheritance a year after I died, meaning, in the old timeline, she had gone after everything. I left the office shaking, not with fear, but with fury. They had planned to bleed me dry, both in the past and in this life. And now that I knew the game, it was time to end it. That evening, Daniel returned home to find me waiting at the dining table. I had the documents spread out like cards at a poker game. He stopped in his tracks when he saw them. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked calmly. "You knew she wanted the money." He sat down, slowly, and nodded. "Not at first. But I started to suspect when she kept asking questions about your father's shares. I didn't think she'd go that far." "And yet you let her stay in our home," I said. "You watched her disrespect me, manipulate you, erase me piece by piece, and you did nothing." "I didn't know what else to do," he said, his voice low. "I thought I was punishing you. For marrying me out of duty. For never saying you loved me." I laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. "You were punishing me for something you assumed. Not once did you ask. You just hated me in silence." He looked up, guilt plain on his face. "I didn't know how to handle someone like you. You were kind, too kind. I thought it was fake. I thought you were waiting for the right time to leave." "Well," I said, standing up and gathering the documents, "you don't have to wonder anymore. I'm leaving. Not because I never loved you, but because I finally love myself enough not to stay." I walked away, my steps light, my spine straight. Sienna was in the hallway when I passed, phone in hand, eyes wide. "You're not serious," she whispered. "You're giving all this up?" "No," I said, pausing. "I'm taking it with me." The next day, I called a press conference through the company's board. I walked into the shareholder meeting like a storm in heels. Cameras flashed, murmurs rose. Daniel sat in the front row, stiff and silent. Sienna stood beside him, still clinging to her illusion of power. I approached the podium, smiled graciously, and dropped the bomb. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am here today not just as the daughter of a visionary, but as the rightful heir to my father's legacy." A second will was discovered, one that was never contested because it was never found until now. My cousin attempted to destroy my father's last wishes. But the truth always survives. Gasps, whispers, chaos. Sienna lunged forward, protesting. "She's lying. She forged it." The lawyer stepped forward and confirmed the handwriting, the seal, the date. All legitimate. All irrefutable. Sienna screamed. Not metaphorically. A real, feral scream that echoed through the marble walls. Security escorted her out, her threats trailing behind her like smoke. I looked at Daniel. For once, he didn't avoid my gaze. He stood up, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years, respect, remorse, and something that might have been love. He approached the stage and said quietly, "Layla, I was wrong about everything." I stepped back, giving him space but keeping my voice firm. "It's too late for apologies, Daniel. We both burned the house down. Now I'm walking away from the ashes." He nodded slowly. "I know. But if I could start over." "You did," I interrupted. "We both did. And you still chose the same mistakes." He looked like he might fall apart, but I didn't wait to see it. I left. Weeks passed. I moved into a smaller house, quiet and bright, filled with colors I actually liked. I joined a foundation that helped women reclaim their businesses from abusive partners. I met with the board of my father's company weekly, gradually taking control, not with arrogance but with clarity. And then, one morning, I received a letter. It had no return address. Just one line on the envelope in Daniel's handwriting: "I hope you're smiling now, finally." But it wasn't Daniel who wrote the letter inside. It was Noah. I wasn't running. I was protecting you. I knew what Sienna was trying to do, and I didn't want to risk dragging you into a fight I hadn't finished. But now it's over. And if you ever feel like sharing that quiet morning coffee with someone who won't judge your smile, I'm here. I folded the letter, holding it for a moment against my chest. Rebirth hadn't just given me a second chance to rewrite the past. It gave me the courage to walk away from people who only loved the idea of me, not the reality. And now, I was finally living my truth. Not as Daniel's wife. Not as Sienna's rival. But as Layla, the woman who rose, burned, and still bloomed again.